Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Golden Age podcast. And with me today, I have the one and only Danny Miranda. Danny, thank you so much for being on the show. It's a real pleasure to talk to you again, and I'm really excited that we can do this. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. I'm really honored and grateful for you coming here and bringing me in today. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're just talking like you're with the cold, and I found fascinating that you arrive and you say, "Well, I'm actually struggling with the cold, but not that won't stop me." And I was just sharing with you that I truly believe that there are few things in this world that might stop you because you just keep posting so much stuff and so much value. Like I love your episodes, and I actually wanted to start by congratulating you on your approach to trying to get Andrew Schultz on your show. Posted a tweet yesterday, and so I was wondering. I wanted to start there. Like, how have you? Do you enjoy his comedy specials? How's your relationship with Andrew?
Yeah, well, my relationship with Andrew is non-existent.
Yeah,
But I mean, I followed him for maybe like 3, 4 years around there, ever since he was on Joe Rogan, and kind of really started picking up into his stuff in the past 2 years.
yeah,
And I've just been really inspired by the way that he attacks content in a similar way to me, and
yeah.
he's just nonstop, and he has a vision, and he has big missions on his mind of where he wants to go.
Yeah.
And so I figured we will eventually have an incredible conversation, if not, in the next month or next
Yeah,
year, in
yeah,
the next 10.
absolutely. Yeah, and you'll get them for sure. And I actually want to start there. So you're like to me, you're a very inspiring example because I've been following you for a while. We've connected a couple of months ago, actually in previous year. And one of the things that I've been really enjoying is to actually watch you win and grow. And like I remember that when you started, you had like a certain kind of guests, but right now you're really like going full on. Like you had James Altucher on the show. You had Tom Bio, you had like all these amazing guests, and you just posted a tweet recently saying that you were reading a book. I don't recall the specific book, but you
The
said that you
third
wanted,
door.
yeah, the third door, and you wanted to be even bigger guests. So my first question is like, what are your like top five guests that you would love to bring on the show and you haven't had the chance to?
Yeah, I kind of just wrote about this just now. In a tweet, somebody asked me the same thing. I The first few that came to mind were Andrew Schultz, of course,
Yeah,
uh, Mike Posner, David Goggins, Jocko Willink, and Joe Rogan. And then
yeah,
I also threw Oprah and Tim Ferriss in there. But
yeah,
yeah, man, just people like that, people who inspire me, who play life at the grandest scale,
yeah.
and I'm really inspired by those types of people.
Yeah, yeah, and awesome. So one of the things that I actually I listened to your interview. I think it was I think you actually just posted as well a clip from that interview where Nick asks you like, where do you see in 5 years? And
Yeah.
you in there you say that you have like this gift for doing research and connecting with people. And I was wondering, where do you think that comes from? Like, where does it? Because I believe you have like this relentless curiosity about people, and so
Yeah.
where does that come from?
That comes from knowing myself and getting deeper in touch with myself.
Hmm.
I I was a curious kid when I was growing up, but the more that I got in touch with myself at a deep level, the more
Hmm.
I became curious about the world around me and other people as well.
Hmm.
So I would say that the relentless curiosity comes from get becoming more better in touch with myself.
Hmm. Perfect. And so for someone listening, what are some ways that you recommend that people can use to get in touch with themselves as well?
Yeah, I would say meditation was a big one for me,
Yeah.
but it could be going to a therapist for someone else. It could be going on a walk by themselves with no inputs. It could be journaling or just like writing down your thoughts, stream of conscious. It's
Yeah.
like whatever method that you do consistently and you enjoy doing as a
Mm-hmm.
way to look at your thoughts and to see like this is what I'm thinking. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is whatever you find that's best,
Mm-hmm.
like lean into that is
Yeah.
like has made me more curious as a human being.
Yeah, perfect. So I actually wanted to go back because a lot of the times that you're interviewed, you talk a lot about podcasting, and I love that. But I actually wanted to explore like not the Danny Miranda podcaster, but actually Danny Miranda the person. So how like you're clearly someone who is very interested in personal growth and personal development. Like how did that relationship started? Have you ever been like that? What was, if there's any like a defining moment that starts your relationship with that area?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've always been interested in personal development because I've always had this idea of like we're here on earth for a small number of time. How can we make that experience as full and as rich as possible? And I always saw these books and I was always curious about the mind and I was always curious about, how can we improve this experience? I remember buying The Game by Neil Strauss, like when I was in eighth grade or seventh grade or something like that, just like really young age to be thinking about personal development or anything like that. But like
Absolutely.
it was always on my mind. I think in fifth grade, I bought a book on like how to become a better blogger. So yeah,
Oh.
I don't know
Mhm.
if that would qualify as personal development per se, but I've just always been interested in how can we make the most out of this, and I think it just comes from the idea of understanding that we're not here for that long.
Yeah. How old are you when you realize that? Because that insight is actually a very profound insight. Like the fact that you realize that, oh, my time here is finite, so I should enjoy as the most I can. Like, do you remember when did you realize that? You,
I don't know when I realized that. I don't know, like there was no specific moment,
yeah, okay. So
but
like, go ahead.
I will say it was like kind of understanding too that I didn't I didn't think that where I was at, like the school, like I never really found a good relationship with school
Mm,
in general. And I always felt like this after like ninth grade, which is like 15, kind of realized that it wasn't for me and it
mm,
wasn't in alignment with the type of person that I wanted to be in the future.
mm,
So I think that was a big realization of like, all right, like this is we have the school system here, but
yeah,
it doesn't really feel real to me in a way.
yeah. Do you remind like do you remind do you like do you remember actually what were like the internal dialogue back then? Because like most there's a lot of kids that I know, and you probably know people that well like that as well, that they go to school and they realize that school is not like for them, but instead of just doing what you did, which was basically grow and realize, well, this is not for me, I'll pursue another path, they'll actually let that affect their confidence and their well-being, and they get depressed. Like, why didn't that happen to you? What was your mental strategy to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, there were some times where I felt down, but I don't think that was my overarching narrative or mental framework at that time. I think that the reason why I didn't get depressed about that was because I was doing interesting things to me. Like I
Mm,
had this Knicks blog, which I talk about sometimes on the podcast, which is
mm,
like I was 15 years old meeting NBA professional basketball players and other reporters who were like in shock at me. And it kind of gave me confidence of understanding like, oh, I could put my own mark on this world. Like I literally just created this website in June and then 3 months later I'm interviewing professional basketball players. So
yeah.
like what's good with that? Like, that's exciting to me.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that. For those of you who don't know that story, tell us how did you come up with the idea of creating the site, and a little bit of how that process happened of getting like how does a 15-year-old kid gets to interview NBA players just like that?
Yeah, so that summer, I there was a big hoopla around LeBron James and where he was going to take his talents. He was a free agent, and he one of the things that he could have potentially chosen, one of the places that he could have potentially chosen to play was the Knicks. And so I was a big Knicks fan, and I was like, wow, there's going to be a bunch of new Knicks fans coming in if LeBron chooses to go to the Knicks. So I kind of started the blog in June, I believe, and I kind of just assumed that there would be something that was going to come out of this free agent period for LeBron. And LeBron didn't end up choosing to play for the Knicks, but I still carried forward the idea of having the blog and writing, and because I found a lot of enjoyment with connecting with other Knicks fans
Yeah,
around the globe.
yeah.
So
So
that's
I
kind of how
was
it came to be.
like, how's that process? Like, do you remember like what were you doing? Were you coming to class and then doing research and then writing? Like, how was your day as a 15-year-old blogger?
Yeah, it was a lot of just like during school class periods, just like writing a post. It was, you know, like every chance I got, watching the game, writing a post game recap, doing it all again, writing a pregame, just trying to find the latest news. And I only did that for like a year and a half. I believe the NBA went to lockout, and uh, that like kind of put a damper on my enjoyment or excitement about what I was doing, and I kind of wanted to just be like a normal kid too.
Mm,
Uh, so yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really
yeah.
exciting, and it was by far the most memorable part of my high school experience.
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned like I wanted to be a normal kid as well, because I remember like when I was in high school, I was having like a band because I was studying music and I wanted to be a musician. So I was having like this totally different experience from other students because most of people in ninth grade they don't have sure they play, some of them can play sports, but most of us are not like having in a stage trying to play. And I was rehearsing and all that stuff. And I remember that sometimes, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love that. But sometimes I would think to myself like, damn, I wish I was just a normal kid who didn't have to go to rehearse right now and then talk with that dude from that bar so we can go play there. And like, and sometimes I think that there's people in our space that are doing all these amazing projects um, and sometimes and I don't know if you feel this but let me know that sometimes it's hard to admit that there are bad days, right? And at least for me, I had like that pressure, and I was working at personal development. I was working in the corporate world and teaching all these strategies so people could live better, and it felt like hypocrite, hypocrite to hypocritical. I don't know what to say. It, to have like a bad day, and so I was wondering, like, have you ever felt that pressure as well? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I've definitely had bad days. The past 2 years, I've had bad days, and when I was writing the Knicks blog, I think bad days are kind of part of the process,
Yeah.
and I would definitely agree that we don't like talk enough about them and how normal they are.
Yeah.
It's like there's gonna be times, where you don't go to the gym for a week and you're like, what's going on? Like, what's wrong with me? And it's part of the process. It's part of um, doing whatever habit you're doing. I don't know like what exactly you mean by bad day, but just days when you're not feeling
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is pretty common.
yeah,
And I think you're so right that more light needs to be shed on that
yeah.
topic.
And that's why I loved so much the fact that a couple of weeks ago you published on Twitter that you were having some troubles with sports betting and the
Yeah.
vulnerability of admitting that to me was really inspiring because like I've told you this before, and I will tell like everyone. I actually talked with my girlfriend before coming in the show about interviewing. Like to me, I always associate with you like this two major things, like this incredible. positive energy and a lot of self-love. And it was really moving to see that someone like that can also have like this vulnerability of sharing some bad moments. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, like how did that start and what are you doing to how's your relationship with sports betting?
Yeah. So that started because I was doing a job that wasn't in alignment with me, and I was doing things daily that weren't in alignment with me. And it
Mm,
was a slow and slippery slope. It wasn't like I woke up one day and was like, "Oh, I'm going to sports bet today." It was like a slow process of not having a lot of bad days in a row and
mm,
not acknowledging them or
mm,
doing anything about it. And so I kind of just got to a point where I was pretty numb to just life in general and just didn't feel good,
mm,
uh, because I was doing this job that I didn't like, and I I didn't want to be the type of person who I was being every day. And so when that happens, when you're out of alignment, like when I'm out of alignment, a lot of things go out of alignment.
mm,
The same way I could have all this positive energy and put it all towards the podcast and say discipline with the podcast, it's like I'm in alignment, so it fuels me to be even more in alignment, and it fuels me to go even deeper on the things that I'm interested in. But
yeah.
when I'm off the path, I'll go way off the path. I'll go so far off the
Oh,
path
brother.
that,
I like it.
so I think I have that to me, the the dual nature of being really focused and really positive, but then I could also go really negative and really downward. So I think it's important to keep in mind and to just acknowledge. And
Yeah,
right now, my relationship with sports betting is I don't really have any desire to sports, but I haven't bet in a long time, and that's just because I don't know. I feel whole myself. I enjoy what I'm doing every day. I don't need the
yeah,
distraction of that or really want it at all.
yeah. Awesome. And once again, congratulations on actually being able to articulate that and share it and put it behind your back. Like, I was wondering, do you have like any strategy that allows you to understand, like to make that connection? Because most people sometimes have some trouble, and I know we're getting into like this more vulnerable spot, but I'll have a bunch of questions ready so you can talk a bunch of other topics. But I'm really curious about
It's
like,
all good.
yeah, thank you, because I was really curious about like, is there any way, how did you make that connection about, well, I'm doing a job that I don't like, and because most people are, they lack, at least in my experience, some of them lack the self-awareness to understand that, like, right, and so only after a bunch of times, sometimes months or even years, they realize, oh wait, I've been doing this and this and this because of that thing. So how do you make that connection, and how did you discover that?
It was just like looking at my body, looking at how I felt, looking at um, my mind state and what I was bringing to every moment. It wasn't
Yeah,
what I was proud of, and I wasn't doing the things that I knew were good for me.
yeah,
And a lot went into that, and a lot of reasons occurred for why that happened. But yeah, man, I think it was just spending a lot of time with myself and just like finally having enough of like, all right, I can't keep living like this. I know I can do more.
yeah. Awesome. I mean, yeah, it's really really inspiring. And once again, man, congratulations. So let's change a little bit of topic. And as I was saying to you before we started to record, like this podcast is named the Modern Golden Age Podcast, and that's because I believe, I don't know if you know this meme. Do you know Visa in Twitter, like Visa Khan? Have you followed
I've
him?
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, he's an awesome dude, and someone who I think you would really enjoy to having on the podcast. And so he has this meme where you have a bunch of bricks lined up, and basically he says that if we tackle them all, we get to a golden age of humanity. And I remember looking at that meme and thinking, I want to be part of that process. I want to be part of the process to get to this modern golden age. And one of the questions that I've been having fun asking a bunch of different guests is like, when you hear modern golden age, like, what does that like? What's the picture that you get in your own mind? Like, to you, what could that mean? Like, what's a modern golden age to you?
The first image that comes to my mind is a picture of like a super city,
Yeah,
where everything's green and everything is just like super high tech.
yeah,
So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
yeah,
But in terms of like that's just like the outer appearance of it.
yeah,
Uh, like for me, a modern golden age would just mean like a closer, more empathy for
mm-hmm,
each other as human beings,
mm-hmm,
and more, uh, I would say, like discipline for our goals,
mm-hmm,
and the ability for us to hold two different thoughts in our head
mm-hmm,
at the same time,
mm-hmm.
without going crazy.
Yeah.
That's what modern golden age strikes to me at this moment.
Yeah, awesome. So those were some principles that you actually somehow connect with that. That's awesome. And I was wondering if we can explore each one of them. Like for instance, when it comes to empathy and connection, like to you, what are some things that we can? Because to me, like to have a conversation, to have a podcast where you interview people, you need to have like a lot of empathy towards the guest and towards the people that you have on your show. And so my first question about that specific principle would be like, what are some strategies that you use to connect better with people? And when I say connect, not in a sense that I can connect with them on Twitter and then getting on the podcast, but once you're having a conversation, like let's say right now, I want to create an even more empathy towards you. What can I do? What can a person do to create more empathy with another one?
I think it's putting yourself in that person's shoes and being quicker to point the blame at yourself than somebody else,
Mm,
because you haven't lived in their shoes. You don't know why they're coming to the conclusions they're coming to.
yeah.
And so making the onus on yourself to understand versus rather than having the other person explain themselves to you. I think
Mm,
that's one way to do it. Another is just to experience more, right? If we experience more cultures, if we experience more types of people, you're going to be more empathetic because
mm,
you're going to see, oh, this person does this way and this culture does this another way. And guess what? They're neither one of them is wrong. They're both living and they're both doing what they can in this moment. So I think like a practical way would be like traveling, or at least traveling in your city. And what I mean by
mm,
traveling in your city is like going up to people, having conversations, learning more about where they're from. One insight I had with my friend Tej was that you can travel to 100 different cities and countries right now if you're willing to talk to 100 different people and learn about their backgrounds. And
yeah,
maybe that's not going to be the case if everyone from your town hasn't left your town, but I think travel exists even if you don't board a plane or go to a
yeah,
different location often.
yeah. So, like, I'm assuming that you already did some of that, like talked with, tried that experience. Was there like any story that really like struck something like if you do that, if I'm once again I'm assuming that you did that, like was there any conversation that really was special or made you somehow uh feel or have an insight?
Yeah. So, I mean, one common theme was I'd be talking to people and I did this experiment basically where for 30 days straight, I talked to someone new every day. like a random stranger, got to know them. And I kind of just realized like people aren't seen often in our world that we live in. There are a lot of people who don't get don't get seen, don't get appreciated often, and they do thankless jobs.
Mm,
And so, like, an example of this might be I went to a bunch of different gas stations and I started talking to people like, hey, when's your shift end? Like, how are you doing? Like, no, like, really, like, how are you? Like,
mm,
and people really appreciated that. And it wasn't just like one story that comes to mind right now, but it was just like the theme of people really appreciating me giving the effort of trying to get to know them better.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that was really impactful for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And like, have you traveled like outside of the US?
Not as much as I would like, but a little bit.
Yeah, where have you been, if I may ask? Like,
Yeah,
what?
I've been to Italy. My ancestors from at least my dad's side are from Italy.
Yeah,
Um, I've been to Canada. That doesn't really count.
yeah.
Colombia. Um,
Were like any of those places brought any kind of insight, and or because once again we're talking about empathy, and like I believe that as well. I believe that if you travel, if you meet different people, if you meet different culture, you'll end up understanding that the only reason why you think something is normal is because you've experienced that your whole life, and if you change you would experience other things. Like, did Italy or Colombia had an impact on you?
Um, yeah, of course it had an impact on me. For Italy, it was when I was 15, so long time ago. Colombia was in the last 3 years, I would say. Uh, but the impact they had on me was just understanding and seeing things in a different perspective.
Yeah.
Nothing like really pops out to mind, but
Mm,
it just also made me have more appreciation for the U.S. and where I live, and uh, I went to Colombia and like the supermarket is like the supermarket that I went to was just like people bringing different items in, and like none of it was like lined up, and
mm,
what none of it was organized, and I was
mm.
like, huh, like I never really considered the possibility for a supermarket not to be organized. And
Yeah,
what a naive perspective, but like that was something that like was like, whoa, like that's just a different way that people are operating, so
yeah.
that was cool.
Yeah, awesome. And so one of the principles was the empathy, and the other one that you said was having a little bit more of discipline towards our goals, and that would help us get to one golden age. And I totally agree with you. And I believe that habits are one of the best ways for us to achieve what you want. And I actually found it interesting because a couple of weeks, months ago, I can actually recall the date. You wrote a tweet saying something like along the lines of finally realizing that you wanted to talk about habits, and that was your core. So I was wondering, how did you come up with that conclusion? Because you've been putting out content for a while. So how did you come up with that revelation? And the second thing is, why habits?
Yeah. So I'll come up with these revelations every now and again, uh, but that doesn't necessarily make them true. Is the first thing I'll say. But habits are so important because I realize that whenever I'm flowing in life, whenever things are going well, whenever I feel good about myself, it's because of the habits that I'm doing. And so habits are such a critical role in creating the life that I want to create.
Mm,
And so when I realized that, I was like, oh, I should probably devote more time to talking about habits and just how habits have helped me, and also like the general way you could go about creating better habits. But I kind of realized like James Clear kind of has habits on lock, and like, you know,
Mm,
when you think of habits, you can think of him, or uh, and so I haven't really spent a lot of
mm.
time, um, like really,
Thinking about that.
yeah, thinking about that. But I do post about habits whenever I can, of like these are the habits that help me.
Yeah, yeah, and because it's funny that you say that because I remember looking at that and because to me I associate you a lot with like conversations and you're one of those persons that just really flows while having a conversation and like what are some habits that you relate to that like what are some like to me you're a great inspiration as a podcaster. And if someday I can be half as good as you are, man, I'll be so happy. So, what are some of the habits that make Danny Miranda the podcaster?
I would say meditation's a huge one. Just being at peace with nothing allows me to give space to the conversation. And I notice that when I don't meditate consistently and I have conversations, I want to interject more, and I'm less comfortable with what is.
Mm,
And yeah, that's something you do really well, is just like giving space for whatever to occurring. And
yeah,
I think that's a beautiful trait that I try to improve. And one way I improve that is by just meditating. Um, Another one is just reading broadly. If the more that I read, the more I can pull examples from different random studies that I find, and just consuming in general, consuming high quality content, and also consuming like content that isn't quote unquote high quality, like Andrew Schultz's podcast wouldn't necessarily be like a self improvement podcast, but it makes me laugh, and it makes me think about how he approaches his voice intonation, and how he has on a guest, and how he just shoots the shit with his friends, and how he does different things,
hmm
and so that's really cool. So consuming broadly and meditating are like two habits that are really important for me to have great conversations.
yeah. And talk a little bit more about podcasting. Like to me, your style of interviewing resembles, at least to me, like Tim Ferriss. Like I remember listening to Tim
Yeah.
Ferriss for the first time, realizing like only like this dude is going like doing some deep research and finding questions that no one would like ask these guests. And I remember for the first times that I was listening to your podcast, I was like, he does that too. Like, how did he come up with all these different questions and you do this incredible research and so I was wondering if you could guide us like through a process of how you do your own research to a guest like so guide us to that process.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I'll do is just search on YouTube the guest name, and I'll look for and key in on the least watched or the longest time
Mm,
ago interviews and piece of content, because those are the things that are furthest away from the guest mind and can really let the guest know that I care about them and I have empathy for them,
mm,
because I understood their journey in a way that maybe other interviewers didn't.
mm,
Uh, so that's one thing. And then I'll watch a bunch of those, usually on like 1.5 speed or 2x speed, just to like get them through, and I'll stop it whenever I find something interesting that I want to talk to them about, jot it down, and then yeah, that's pretty much the bulk of it. I mean, I'll go to their tweets in the past and search like some of their most liked tweets from, the last 10 years, and see if there's any gems in there.
mm.
And just really try to show effort, and because I really care about them, because I
Yeah.
really want to know more about them, and I want to learn about what they have to say about these things. So
Mm,
yeah, that's kind of my process.
yeah and how like then what how long do you start doing that before having a guest?
Yeah, I would say it's usually like within the week, and usually within like 3 days of them being on.
You do
Uh,
all that research. Sorry to interrupt, but are you
yeah,
saying you do all that research in 3 days a week?
Yeah.
Jesus. I was thinking like you would say something like, yeah, I usually have like 1 month before where I consume all that. You do that on 3 days. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's because I've done it so many times, so I can take something that used to take a week or 2 weeks or three and compress it into 3 days or 2 days even. Like, and it's like I know what to look for now.
Mm,
Um, and so I don't know. It's just like I like when it's fresher in my mind because I could do research for a guest a month from now and I'll forget something that I
yeah.
would have researched. Even if I wrote it down, I'll be like, what does that mean? Like, I'll have that sometimes where I'll do research, a guest will cancel, and they'll book again for the next month. And I'll be like, what did that note mean? I have no idea. So that's why I
Mm,
do it all within that week
that
period.
makes so much sense. Cause
Yeah.
yeah, because that allows you to have that fresh in your mind. So and
Fresh.
when you're having conversations, like how much of it are previous thought out questions and how much are questions that just arise in the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's like 50-50. I
Mm,
ideally want it to be 50-50
mm,
because I want to have my research, but also know that the most interesting thing that somebody says is something that they just said, not that I have
mm,
prepared. And it's not always the case, but if I just keep it both of like 50% research, 50% let it go wherever it wants to go, I
mm.
find that's the best for me. But
Yeah.
I'm
Is
open
it?
to hearing other ways of researching and interviewing.
Yeah, and like no, because that makes a lot of sense. Because I'm not gonna lie to you. Sometimes I try to understand that, and some questions are easy to understand. Like, oh, he clearly made research. Or sometimes you just say like, I was watching a video from you, and I was like, all right,
Yeah.
that's research. But sometimes you do such great questions that I can't understand. Like, is there any research behind this, or is it just coming out with that in a moment? And to me, that's fascinating because
Yeah.
I'm always trying to understand that, and I believe that as a podcaster, like you need to be really good at the craft of asking questions, and so and I was wondering like you're pretty good at that. So how have you ever been like that, or how did you come up, or how did you start to improve the quality of your questions?
I just researched it. I
All
just
right.
I looked up Tim Ferriss interviews with Larry King and I looked up, like what does Joe Rogan do and like studying the craft and just like taking notes on it. And you could study all you want, but then applying it twice a week or three times a week for the past year and a half has been incredibly impactful. Uh, so yeah, I think it's like push-ups. You could read about the push-ups, but like when you apply it, you see how the push-ups shape you and you can't really know how to ask a good question unless you're asking questions often, is
Yeah.
my perspective.
Yeah. Like like looking back at the like dozens of episodes that you already have, like is there any particular question or piece of research that you pointed to a guest that make you feel really proud of it? Like I don't know if I'm making the question
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if there's one particular
Mm,
moment or anything like that that stands out, but I get such a high from understanding that the person on the other end is feeling seen in that moment.
mm,
And what I mean by that is like they can they can feel that I care about them in that moment without me having to say I care about you. They know that I do. And
mm.
so that is really impactful for me and it always brings me a level of joy.
Yeah, and maybe that's why I mean I don't know, but maybe, yeah, maybe that's why you get so much honest answers, right? Like I and you get like because that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about your podcast. Is that there's you're able to put the guest in such a calm and comfortable space, and you get these answers that otherwise you wouldn't get, right?
Yeah.
And like for instance, I love your recent interview. By the way, but let's just dive in. You have a pinned tweet right now on your Twitter about your one of your conversations, and first of all, it's phenomenal. Like the way you wrote that thread. I remember that I was actually you posted like 2 3 minutes and I saw it, uh, and I was reading to that. And the moment that you said, "Well, that's what happened to Sahil," and here's the link to the interview, I was like, damn, that was so good. And so, because I'm talking about, of course, your conversation with Sahil, which was phenomenal, by the way. So, and I was wondering, like, how did you come up with the idea of writing this thread? Because there's a lot of comments on YouTube of people saying, like, yeah, I'm here because of the thread, like, great thread. I mean, how did you come up with that?
I I kind of just was doing the timestamps for the episode, and I was like, what's the most impactful thing that happened in this episode? And like, what is the part of the episode where I'm telling a friend about it, and like, how would I lead with telling them about it?
Yeah,
And it's like, oh, it's like this story is like, yo, he met the Apple CEO, he mentored him, and like, how can I frame that in an interesting way?
yeah,
Is like how I thought about it.
yeah.
So yeah, thank you for saying that.
No, so that was awesome, and that actually gets me to another question that I have about like how you relate with guests, which is like because I remember when I was doing some more researched episodes back in my previous podcast, one of the things that was happening was I was picking like these random I try to do some deep research as well.
Yeah.
Nothing on your level, like you're awesome on that. But I remember that what happened was like most of the questions I was posing were questions that it made the guest feel like heard and listened to, and he realized that I cared enough to do that deep research. But then what I was finding out was that the answer that they would give would be like the answer that I already had find out, you know.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, like, does that happen to you as well? And
Yeah.
if not, it does.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And so how did like how does does that make you feel? Like, would you like to have different questions so you would get like answers that you wouldn't get through deep research? How do you relate with that? I
Yeah.
don't.
So that is such a great question. So it's like sometimes I'll ask a question that I've heard, or I'll ask a question and I'll realize the guest is talking about something and doing their scripted answer.
Yeah.
And my whole thing is like, how can I get them off the script? And so what I often think about is not to ask them a question about the thing in which I've researched, but asking them a question to their answer to the
Mm,
thing they've researched, to the
mm,
thing I've researched. So it's like a guest will, I'm researching a conversation, a guest is asked a question, they answer it, and then my question to them on my podcast is a question I would have if I was in the room with them
mm.
and on that first podcast,
Yeah. Follow up
and then
question.
they're like, whoa, like I've never thought about it like that because I'm continuing the thread that
Mm-hmm.
they had once were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that
That
makes
makes
so much
sense?
sense. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And aren't you afraid, like, have you ever felt like you did a question, and maybe this is too much of a personal question, and feel free to just say I don't want to answer. But have you ever asked a question to a guest where you feel like the amount of research or the fact that you're asking a question that they've never thought about make them uncomfortable?
No, I
No,
don't think about that.
that's so, okay. So what do you think about?
I think about, I know my intent is pure.
Mm,
And if they don't want to talk about it, like that's cool.
mm,
But I also know that I'm not trying to get them, right? Like
mm,
it doesn't make me uncomfortable because I'm
mm,
not coming from a place of uncomfort. And
mm,
I respect if someone doesn't want to talk about it and we'll move on and talk about something else. But I also maybe want to put them in an uncomfortable position sometimes
yeah,
because I know that when we're in uncomfortable positions, we actually grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't really think about like, oh, I'm putting them in a tough spot.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, that makes total sense. Danny, I just want to ask you like one or two more questions because and like to me it's really important to say that I really appreciate your work. Yeah, I'm a very big fan of yours and your content, and I truly believe that conversations like your podcast and the kind of conversations that you have, because the conversations that you're having are not just simply conversations. You're actually allowing like these big people to come up with answers that may serve not only you and them, but also everyone listening, right? Like
Exactly.
and that's why I had zero uh, hesitation into bringing you to this podcast because I know that's what vulnerability is about to me at least is trying to help other people to like raise our vibration in our conscious into another a whole new level and what you do it really helps on that and to me one of the things that I also associate with you is this high level of energy
Yeah.
and what I mean by energy, I know that if I ask you what are some habits that will that give you that energy, you'll answer me with meditation and probably going to the gym. That makes total sense. Because,
Yeah.
but what I was wondering is talking a little bit of in a more esoteric space. Like I truly believe that you have like this out of the world energy, like you're like a direct connection with the universe where you just let have all this energy flow. Like, how did you get that? Like, how can like a common dude get that much of spiritual energy just like you?
Bro, first of all, thank you for the kind words. Two, I'm just a normal guy. You know, like I'm just a I know it's easy to put those people whose content we consume on a pedestal.
Yeah,
And I'm not suggesting you're doing that, but I just want to let you know, like, and let anyone listening know, I'm just a normal person. I get sick, I get
yeah,
colds. I'm just like, uh, but I mean, I don't I don't know if I have a direct line to God, a direct spiritual connection, but I appreciate that you would think that. And I just feel like it's a lot of time listening to myself and listening to really smart people who impact my thinking in some way.
yeah,
I don't know if I don't know if there's anything like that special about me
yeah,
in general, other than I'm willing to work really hard.
yeah,
I love the podcast and I love connecting with people and I love connecting with myself. So I think that's the hidden secrets
yeah.
if you were to ask.
Yeah, but those are because those are things that we can do, right? I'm not saying that you're special in a way that nobody else is. I believe that we all are, but I clearly believe
Yes.
that it's almost like we all have that connection, but we have like this mental barrier, and we have to
Yeah.
put in the work to let go of that barrier. And to me, you're one of the guys that I know that actively does the work to dissolve that and to have a bigger connection and then that comes through at least for me so Danny I'm really happy with it and I just have one or two more questions before we go so the first one is there any question that I mean you interview a lot of people you also been in a bunch of podcasts is there any question that you would like a podcaster to have asked you that never happened.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay,
I don't
perfect.
I don't I don't go into podcasts expecting to be asked specific questions. I
Mm,
kind of just like let's see what happens, you know, like
mm,
and if, even if you ask zero questions to me, it would still be interesting to
yeah,
me in some way.
yeah.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect, perfect. Because I was wondering, because if there was one, I would ask them, and I would be like, yeah, I was the first to ask that Danny Miranda, to Danny Miranda. Yeah, so yeah.
One thing is I always get nervous talking to other podcasters,
Oh, really?
people who have studied the craft. I don't get nervous for really any interviews,
Hmm.
but the ones where I do, it's like, oh, this person studied podcasting for 10 years.
Mm,
And that for me gets me like, oh shoot, like this person knows what I'm gonna mess up.
yeah.
Um, But yeah,
That's so interesting. But have you ever felt like, because I've listened to a bunch of your like, what's your favorite podcast? Like, where you as a guest, like, what's the favorite interview you've ever had? Is there
I
any?
don't
I
know.
mean, yeah, like
Yeah,
you
I
have.
don't know if I have a favorite.
Okay,
Like,
perfect.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah, because I mean, I was thinking about that, and I was trying to understand, like, because I've listened to a bunch of your interviews, like you being interviewed, and there's
Yeah.
not a single one where I think like, oh, Danny's nervous here, so you do a great job, at least at masking that.
No, I
Um,
misspoke. I meant when I interview
oh,
other
okay.
podcasters.
Oh, sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't understand. Oh,
No, you're
yeah,
good.
that makes more sense. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, but then let me think about it, because I once again I don't know if I ever heard an
Like,
episode where
yeah.
where I thought like, well, Danny's nervous here. Like, I mean, once again, I think I truly, and I now listen to a bunch of podcasts, but I truly believe you're one of, like, you're, I know I don't watch much NBA, but you know, when there's this new player in town, and people are like, well, this guy is new, but he'll definitely go places. Like, to me, you're that guy.
I
And so,
appreciate that.
nah, that's fine. Danny, one last question, please. If people want to connect with you and want to follow your work and in your podcast, what are the best places to do so?
I would say the Danny Miranda podcast is the number one spot. You could go check out whatever episode is interesting to you and let me know on Twitter at Hey Danny Miranda, what you thought of that episode. That would mean the world to me. So
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Well, I'll leave the links in the description of the episode, and I'll also, as well, on YouTube and all that stuff. Danny, thank you so much, for being on the show. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I know that I know I'm a very big fanboy of yours, and so, but it's true. I mean, I truly enjoy your work, and to me, it's a real privilege to be able to talk with you for these minutes. So thank you once again, for being here. And to everyone listening to the show, if you like, please go follow Danny Miranda if you don't do that already. Do yourself a favor and do that. And also, if you like, please consider subscribing the podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And I'll see you on the next episode. Danny, once again, thank you so much. Bye.